You're listening to the Good for Business podcast, where we feature interviews, tips, and tricks from owners, operators, and innovators throughout Mississippi and around the world. And now, your host, Colin Krieger. Hey, welcome to the show this week. My guest is John Klosterman. John Klosterman, the owner of the Ridge House here in Columbus and the co-owner of the Southern Exchange Antique Store. Welcome to the show, and you've brought Murph the dog, which you may be able to see on the widescreen there today.
Yeah. And Murphy is, he goes with me everywhere. He's my little co-pilot.
So real quick, as we always do, give me your pedigree information. Who, what, when, where, why. Who are you and where do you live now?
Okay. My name is, if you want the full name, they saddled me with a big name. It's John F. Klosterman III. And I was born in Mobile, Alabama. And I'm from there, was raised there. I went to Catholic schools my whole life, all the way to in Mobile to Spring Hill College. Graduated from there. Went on to work for my family's business, and then I realized I didn't want to work for my family's business, so went into the corporate food and beverage business and worked for chains. And was married, had 2 kids, divorced. Went out on my own after I sort of semi-retired after working for a large corporation. Golf course, food and beverage director is what my handle was. Did my own catering and special events, and that's kind of where I was. And I decided after COVID that I wanted to find a second home that I could have fun with. My kids had grown up, and I wanted kind of a project, and I started looking, and I couldn't find anything in Alabama that was, something I could afford or that I liked or wasn't in the middle of somewhere or falling down. And so a friend of mine said, you really should look in Mississippi. Well, for an Alabama person, I guess, you don't look in Mississippi. Just like Mississippi people say, oh, I'm not going to go to Alabama. So I was like, well, okay, I'll look. So I did. And the 4th house on a website this friend sent me had my current home here in Columbus. And I fell in love with the pictures, reminded me of the raised cottages down on the Gulf Coast. And so I called the real estate agent and Rusty Green and called him, and Rusty said, well, when would you like to schedule this? I said, I'll be there tomorrow morning. I think it kind of freaked him out. I drove all night, looked at it, fell in love with it, but I knew it had a lot of work to do. And after about 3 months of back and forth, inspections, everything else, finally purchased it. And it's my second home. So came to Columbus and fell in love with the house first, and then I started falling in love with the city.
That's a good spot. We came up here after Katrina. I'm from New Orleans, but we did live on the Gulf Coast. We lived in D'Iberville for 3 whole months before our house floated off. And it took us a while to get used to the small town life. It's not that tiny, but we've liked it. And look, with somebody last name Krieger, I want to apologize that I've been calling you Klosterman for the last 3.5 years.
That's okay.
So we'll go with Klosterman. So what's baby John doing when you're growing up in Mobile? What's your first job you've ever had?
Well, my mother's family was from Mobile. They'd been there since like 1840. They were old Mobile. They were just a poor old Mobile. And, but they ended up doing very well in the restaurant business and hotel business. And so we grew up working in the family business. So you would get home from school and we would drive to the one big restaurant. The bus would let us off right in front of the restaurant, and we would be there doing our homework. I can't remember when I wasn't there, or either home or at the restaurant. And then, of course, that's when Sundays everybody shut down. So we would all go to Dolphin Island or go on the boat, my grandfather's boat or something. But then as we got older, Sundays we worked, and that all stopped, and we worked and worked and worked. And I would go to school and work, and we had our fun, but the family was very motivated to stay in the restaurants. So,
yeah, no, and there's all kind of, we've said on this podcast before that there's almost every successful entrepreneur did some time in the restaurant business. I know you still have some catering and food service involved in it. Usually it's that, and then there's some level of working outdoors where you get punished. And but when you throw in the pressures and the benefits of a family business, which is you can make yourself a grilled chicken sandwich anytime you want, but you can't leave. And
yeah, you're tied. It's like you're chained to the grill but you're free, Yes, that kind of
Yeah,
thing
and the
happens.
plus at a young age, I grew up in New Orleans working in restaurants in the French
Yeah.
Quarter at 13. There's a heck of a lot of benefits, and it may affect your grades a little too, and it may affect some other stuff. But you learn some tricks from your older coworkers.
Oh yeah, I remember one time I was a senior, and my grandfather was, of course, the boss, and you couldn't take off. You just didn't do anything but just work. If you wanted to do something, it was either had to be before or after work. So I went to my grandfather. I said, "Papa," we called him Papa. I said, uh, this is my graduation, and we're doing our not homecoming, our prom." And I said, I want to go to my prom." He goes, "Oh, son, I don't know if I can let you off. I don't know what I can do without you." I was like, "It's my prom." And so he finally let me off, and I went. But that was kind of the thing. You are tethered to a family business, and to your obligations to it. So yeah.
What is it? A famous restaurant or hotel that people would know down there?
Well, down there it was Mac's Wheelhouse. My grandfather, he loved everything to be named after himself. He had Mac's Drive-In, Mac's Wheelhouse, Mac's Steakhouse, and then we had grocery stores before that, and it was Flowers Food Store because their last name was Flowers. And then there was a hotel on Dolphin Island, and that was the Bayside. And so our family had one over in Seaside, Florida as well. So I mean, it's one of those things where we were stretched all over the place, and you just went where you had to go. So
And real easy from a distance. From I tell the story here all the time about Doug Pelham's is Zachary's. He's always there. The Huck brothers, they're always there. Mr. John's at United Deli, Doty's at the Country Kitchen. And the best example I have is the Bean family, who has several franchises, different concepts, and all that stuff. But guess what? At the end of COVID, Bean, Mr. Bean and his son are working in the kitchen.
yep. I mean, the trick is you just once you take on that. That whole deal. The only way you're successful is if you're there.
Yeah, it is hard for restaurant people to let go, but it's also hard to tell a restaurant's incredibly successful to pay somebody enough with a commission or part of the profits that they care enough. My friend Trey Weigel owns the part of the 4 Papa John's here in North Mississippi. He figured out he's just going to pay his general managers a lot of money. And so he pays them a lot, and they have an incentive to run it. So the 4 stores here, the 3 of the guys have been with his company for 15, 20 years running one store. And people would be like, well, why? I'm like, well, they have a vested interest in the success. And
Absolutely.
Meanwhile, other people try to run a restaurant and think they're not going to be there. Just a terrible, terrible mistake.
Well, the problem is if you can do that when you can entice somebody to work harder, to work smarter, and be more dedicated with more money, then that is a great tool. But in restaurant business, so many people payroll is so high that they don't have that luxury. So that's where a lot of the conundrum comes from.
Yeah, and you have the grass is greener thing too. The road is littered in Columbus and Starkville of people who are assistant managers who got a job offer from Buffalo Wild Wings and leave. Right. And don't realize how great they had it.
Oh, I agree. Yeah,
and so how did the business transfer? I know you said you kind of stepped out of it, but how did it go from the grandfather to your father? Was it easy transition?
Well, my father was from Louisville, Kentucky, and he worked for my grandfather for a while, but then my parents got a divorce, so he moved back to Louisville. So,
okay.
It was kind of one of those things. My mother, a lot of times the mother's family is the primary. That's how it is with grandkids and stuff, and that's how it was no different with my family. And so we had the only one because my mother was the female and there were all these boys, and we were the only Klostermans, and then everybody else was Flowers. So it was like we were the first grandkids, but we were not always known as the official grandkids because we didn't have that name. But it kind of worked in our favor because we could kind of step away a little bit from it. But
one less layer of guilt.
One less. And being Catholic, we just add that next layer of guilt.
Yeah.
So, but no, it was one of those things where I worked there, and I really, as every food and beverage person from a family, I'm good friends with. Did you know Clark Brennan in New Orleans, the Brennans? He went to Spring Hill with me, and so people try to step away, but you always fall right back into it, and it's one of those things where I said I'm going to go be a lawyer. Well, you see how far that went. I graduated, went to pre-law day, and I was like, oh God, I hate this. I'd rather you stick punji sticks up my fingernails. But it was one of those things where I said, well, what do I want to do? So I said, well, what I know is food and beverage. So I was hired by a large corporation and worked with them for 4 years and was moved around to different cities. And I did real well, moved up. And then a headhunter found me through a friend who had gone to work for this company, and it was the Robert Trent Jones Golf Trail in Alabama. And they needed a food and beverage director and on the trail. And so I was young, but I had a lot of background. And so I went into it. And as the company grew, I grew, and we kind of developed together. And, I was there for 23 years, and we ended
Okay.
up doing the LPGA tournaments and the Nike tour and one of the PGAs. And I would go and open up their new facilities and train people. And I was on their training committee and come up with training programs. And so it was one of those things where it was it was restaurant business, but it was not the pressure of a traditional restaurant company, but it was a very political corporate company because we were owned by the state retirement systems of Alabama. So you really had to watch P's and Q's. It was all about going through the whole corporate process. I loved it. And then until I didn't, until I was like 23 years later, I was burnt out, and I was like, I need something new, something more exciting, something that will motivate me. And so I left and took an early retirement and started just catering. And it was really the best thing I could have done. And I was able to pick and choose and do things I really love to do. I had a great staff, and I still do, and I still do those things. And but after COVID, nobody was doing parties. So basically, that's kind of how I got into the shop that I've got here in Columbus. Is that a friend of mine has a high-end consignment shop in Fairhope, Alabama, and that's where I'd moved to. And it was literally one block away. And I went in to sell a bunch of stuff, as everybody was doing, trying to redo a house. And he goes, I need help. I can't get help. Would you come help me? And I was like, sure, I don't have anything else to do. So I went in and started helping him. And a year later, through all the details, I became his buyer, and I would go to market in Atlanta, and I would buy everything because he sold old, new, used, antique, everything. And so I was his placement editor, his buyer. I was pretty much whatever he told me to be. I learned so much from David, and this guy was from Meridian, Mississippi, and interestingly enough. So when things started coming back, and I decided to buy my house here, he was also one that gave me a lot of information about Columbus and the uniqueness of Columbus, and, the money that was here and the age of the homes and all the historic references and everything. So it kind of all came together. I think everything happens for a reason. You're directed in a certain way. The
Yeah.
universe leads you there. And I really think the universe kind of led me to where I am here. And then, after I finished Ridge House, I bought the house, renovated it, started doing events, doing Airbnb, still doing parties. I was ready to still do something else. And that's when I opened my shop, the Southern Exchange. And I say my shop, I'm partnering with Billy Cox. He's a good friend. He also has a historic home here. And he had moved here from DC, sort of retired. And we kind of were here together going, what are we going to do? And we ended up deciding we would do this together. And the stimulus was me working in Fairhope, and I'd seen how it was just so successful. And so that's how we kind of got to
And
the
people
shop.
will travel for that sort of thing, especially
Oh,
now that there's an entire generation that's retiring and passing away and downsizing that's got some nice
yeah,
stuff. And, my grandmother was refurbished antiques in New Orleans. I don't have too much knowledge of it other than I can narrow you down to 20 or 30 years. And I tell people, I see their stuff on Facebook that says antique, and I'm like, and you can't tell because of the lighting, whether it's built
right.
in the 60s or the 1800s. And, and here I've dealt, Billy Cox is my neighbor. I live on North Side, and
Yeah,
we've done some deals together and stared at old wood and talked about old furniture before. That's what's fascinating about this town to me, is that plantation effect of that. The city didn't get burned down.
right,
There's a lot of people who either have money or they have people coming through with them that
right.
have some money. And I've watched the antique games compared to maybe the early 2000s, where you could just order a container load from Europe I'm like, oh, people you don't know, but you'd go, hey, I
Mhm.
need an $80,000 container loan. And you get, a couple things that were 200 years old, couple repros, just whatever you got in it, the same way like construction guys can order granite. And I know some of that died down.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
that's the problem is
Yeah.
with all the current cost of shipping and, the world, yes, is much smaller, but it is much more costly to, the old way was you go over there and you would shop and buy antiques in England and France and you get it for nothing and then you'd ship it over here for nothing and these antique dealers made a bunch of money. Well, now it doesn't work that way. You go there and you can still get really great stuff. It's not as cheap as it used to be, and shipping and containers are outrageous.
Yeah.
And so what happens is that, I found that people are starting to look home and within the communities. And that's the one great thing about, selling consigned items is that you can do everything from antiques all the way to new stuff and you cover it all and a little bit of everything.
You may actually have a story too behind the furniture, which helps a lot with some of the people where like, oh, this came from this house, and John Fields is
Uh-huh.
is a junker in town,
Right.
has a disease. He probably stares through the window, fogging up your window every day. But John knows if a chest or an armoire belongs to a house in his
Right.
mind, it's tantamount to anything else you might do. So.
And that is huge here. Like, so my house, the Prophets owned it before I did. From what I understand, Mrs. Prophet was her lineage goes back to Captain Young, who had Waverly, and so who built Waverly. So that was her great great grandfather, and she was the fortunate recipient of tons of stuff from Waverly, including the square baby grand piano. And so, I mean, that's the kind of thing you're talking about. Is things have stayed here, and once they come up for sale in these estates, people, there's a lot of notoriety to the estates and the things that are in it and the desirability. You got a lot of people who will run to an estate sale or to a shop if they hear that something is from Columbus or will belong to a certain family or something like that.
Have y'all started to see people coming? I'm sure from Starkville. There's a
Oh.
lack. The biggest challenge I have here, I've been here 20 years, is
Yeah.
just watching I think 8 of the last 11 houses in Starkville that were over 100 years old got torn down. And I understand
Yeah.
progress and stuff, but growing up in New Orleans where you still can't tear stuff down, even during Katrina, they're like, you better just rebuild it. It was disappointing,
Right.
but it is also disappointing to see like the stuff inside the house not get salvaged.
It's, it's one of those things where I think we, Mobile kind of has the same history. They say half of Mobile got torn down, but there was so much of it that it still looks like this picturesque city. And so they've done a good job of mixing new with old. And I think it's one of those things where Columbus is probably going to be a similar, is that there's so much that was saved, even though there's a bunch that was lost. I think that Columbus is in a perfect scenario, the perfect situation, being in the Golden Triangle with all the businesses and the industry that's popping up. Even maybe a lot of it's in the county, but we are the largest city in the Golden Triangle.
Yeah.
And I think our downtown makes us perfectly placed. I mean, we are a historic downtown, and I think that we have the ability to mix some of the new or even new construction that looks old. I just see this city being the potential of being another Fairhope. I really do.
It's fair to say, and the outsiders are the ones who seem to think I'm still an outsider.
Mhm.
I like to say I've been here 20 years, but there's a lot of little old ladies in real big houses that tell me I'm not from here.
Yeah,
and I'm
no.
fascinated all the time when I'll talk to people and I'll realize that I've known their sister for 10 years or their cousin,
Right.
and you don't realize it. But I've been screaming from the rooftops to Rusty Green, all our politicians and everybody, that the rest of the country last year collapsed in real estate. Mississippi stayed about even. Starkville was up almost 5%. Columbus was up 10% last year. There's not, and it's real numbers because there's not a lot of new homes going up. So that means, like, listener, your house went up 10% in value. Downtown's full, and it's not a kitschy downtown tourist downtown. We get some tourism, but it's not candy shops. It's lawyers and some functional boutiques, and every spot that opens up, somebody takes a shot. And it, with the development, they're trying to work out the deal at Burns Bottom which is to build old looking new houses. And it happens a little slower than people think here compared to Madison, Mississippi,
Of course, of course, yeah.
but we're in Mississippi, folks. You know,
Well, and also, I mean, this is a small community. Things don't move at the record pace that they do in large cities. Like I used to live in Houston. You know, things move.
Yeah.
You can drive by a place. You know, 1 month later, you come back and there's a building up there. I mean, it was literally that fast. And you know, in Fairhope, you look at, and I keep bringing up Fairhope, but Fairhope, Alabama, is become this little
Yeah.
mecca of like that whole Americana perfection and idea of perfection. And you know, the thing is that people are very drawn to that. They want Mayberry again. They want something they can connect with, and their kids can grow up in, go out in the front yard on the street and play and ride their bikes and not be worried about their safety and everything. And I really think that Columbus, you know, we are really geared towards the potential to be that. And, you know, all those buildings down there, if they build, the more residential that you build, the more that they need a downtown. If it's close to the downtown, the more they need those businesses. Like we really need to, even if it's a small market, you need a market. You need to have the coffee shops, which we have. You need restaurants. You need cleaners down here. You need a couple of gas stations. You need all the things that we have to have. A little hardware store. We've got, you know, military. I mean, so there's a lot of things that are here. I think that people get so scared of, you know, I remember when I came here, someone was like, "Oh, you're going to Columbus? It's so dangerous. The crime's terrible." And then I got here and I was thinking to myself, God, what am I gotten myself into? And I'm like,
there's nothing happening.
It is not. I'm like, go to Mobile sometime. We got street shootings. I mean, the downtowns, and it's beautiful downtown, and people go there in droves. They get shot, and they'd still go down there. And I'm not saying Mobile's bad, but what I mean is that you got crime everywhere. You can't let that dictate your world. And I think that there's so many positive things here. And, you know, people always tend to dwell on the negative. But there's so many things that I think we're not as good at promoting in Columbus. But they're good at promoting crime. So you know what I mean? The idea of it. So I think what we need to do is when we promote these businesses, the downtown and intact, you know, the fact that you have these beautiful homes, the fact you have the military base, the fact that all these corporations and these industries are out in the county, the fact that it's still great farmland and that you're on the Tom Bigby. And I mean, it's kind of like there's no end in sight for what the potential could be.
Yeah, and the ingredients are there, and sometimes it's how you talk about yourself. You know, if you can start a business where I like talking to unreasonable people who come up with ideas. Munson Brothers is the best idea, where he was a stockbroker. I bring him up on the show a lot, but he's a stockbroker who starts selling beard wax and candles and then opens up a beer and pizza place in not counting on the soccer complex to get developed.
Right.
But then it does. And we have all these things going for us. I like to tell this stat all the time. On average, we're the 13th largest city in Mississippi. We have the 13th crime rate by every statistic available. We have bad years, like Starkville and Octibaha is having a horrible year. There are like 11 shootings this year and a couple of murders, and we're far, far behind them. But their narrative is like everything's great and everything's wonderful, which is fine. You can have that narrative and be good.
Right.
New Orleans never has that narrative. The locals down there, I could get you to New Orleans tonight to die, but I could not in Columbus. I couldn't get you shot if I tried, because most of the crime is bad guy on bad guy. But the most interesting part to me is we have the largest weekly paper in the state of Mississippi, The Packet, that focuses on a lot of crime. You got the Dispatch and CBI, which are either third or fourth in their categories for newspaper and TV station in the 13th largest market.
Right.
So every single thing that happens here, it's the easiest to cover. And I just left WCBI a minute ago. Like, you're going to cover what's in your backyard and you're going to see what's in your face. And, you know, it's just part of it. And to compare ourselves to Starkville is kind of silly because it's a heavily subsidized because of the college. And
it's the university.
Yeah.
It's a university town, and they're in
nothing
all
to do with what we're doing.
They're not a real city because it's propped up by the university.
Yeah.
And that doesn't I don't want to take away from what they do, but perception is reality. And when you start seeing all these things, you think, oh, that's what it is. And I think that that's where we need to do better here in Columbus. I think that we need, like you said, be more positive and put it and prop up the good. That's it.
Yeah.
And it really does work. You build it, they will come. And I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who, okay, so I have my brother-in-law who's a property development in Birmingham, came here, fell in love with the
That's
place.
right. I
You
spoke to
met
him.
him.
Yeah, absolutely.
He has tried and tried and tried to buy properties here to build a boutique hotel downtown. But the problem is, it's, people aren't budging. And I don't know what the problem is with that. But when you got people with money coming down here and who want to invest, I mean, that's why Mobile turned around. Dr. Bronner came in from the retirement systems of Alabama, who I worked for, and he bought 3 skyscrapers downtown. He renovated the largest historic hotel. He built a skyscraper. That's what we need. People, I think we should never be scared of outside money. Outside money is not going to take control of things, but it will definitely help make it better. And I think that the people who are here, who are socially, solid and who are financially solid, are always going to be that. It doesn't take away from that. We need to be welcoming, just like we do with industry, to business downtown. And we need to be welcoming to these boutique industries that's really what fits in this town. And I hope that that's something that we see more of, because I can't tell you how many people, some of my friends from Mobile who come up here, they fall in love with it. And they're like, I want to do something here. I mean, these people got money. They're getting ready to retire, and they just want to have fun, and they want to do something. They just want to build an apartment complex, or they want to build a retail space, or they want to do a hotel or something. And I just think, how can we as a city, as a community, help make that easier? How can we facilitate that for them? That's what I want to see. I want to see, I want to hear yes. The answer is yes. What's the question?
Yeah.
And that's what they taught us when I worked for that chain restaurant. That was one of their big logos, was the answer is yes. What's the question to the customer? And we never, basically, you don't say no.
Yeah.
And it's like, we need to be that needs to be our motto.
My credo when I was in the restaurant business and at Papa John's at a marketing level was sure, why not? Answer was like, the answer to the complaint is sure, why not? Don't let them finish it. How can we make it better? Stephen Jones, the new mayor, is trying with that. He's got a lot going on. They're trying to do stuff, but he said he's opened up his first couple meetings is, what does a perfect relationship with the city look like to you, the link or the sheriff's department or whatever?
Yeah.
And it's a fight because it's been somewhat of a systemic fight between the city and the county here, and I know they're making a lot of progress recently, and I'm happy to see that. It's hard to change narrative. When I got here, and I push back really, really hard when people are like, I can't find good help. I'm like, well, go to Harvey's, go to Zachary's, go to Up Down.
It's out there.
Guess what? They have good help.
Yeah.
And I said, it's not. There's no mystical Columbus. There's no help. There's negative people. The only rumor that's ever been true here that has been frustrating was that they'd tell me there's 2 or 3 families holding us back. Well, one of them owned the mall. Joe Max Higgins in the Link had a $28-something million deal ready for the mall in 2017, and they laughed. They're like, "Oh, we're not taking that." 5 years later, they sold for $2 million and went bankrupt. There are some families that are just don't want. It's not that they want things better, but the same people. I'll speak to an exchange club or Rotary. I will open my meeting and print up some things and be like, here's my talk on why everything's great. I said, all of y'all own businesses in town. 6 of y'all yesterday said how horrible it was. And I said, but somebody tries to buy your land to build something bigger and you don't want to sell it to them. So,
right. It's always that person with the outside eye that can see the potential, unless you're a very special person. And I think that that's something like you said, we need to be open to that. And I myself look forward to meeting the new mayor. I think that, that we have the makings for coming together, and like you said, the city and the county working together to make it even more productive. I love that idea of the cities where they take and combine the city and county facilities. I lived in Jacksonville, Florida, and they did that. And it really, that's one reason why the city of Jacksonville is so successful. And it came together. And I mean, it used to be the city was rough, and now it's really come around, and it's really moving and shaking. I don't know. I mean, I'm definitely not the person. I'm not a politician, and I'm definitely not somebody who says, oh, I got the answer for you.
Yeah.
But I definitely know the positive ways to move forward. I know the questions they ask, and I know I have the willingness to act. I didn't know how to fix a house. I had never owned now I'd grown up in old houses, but we
Yeah.
always had workers who fixed it. But, I came here and somebody said, "You've lost your damn mind because you don't know what the hell you're doing." And they were right. I probably did lose my mind, but I was so determined. I wanted to have fun and I wasn't old. Hell, I wanted to break out and do something I had never done before. And I really, I succeeded at it, not because I was good at it. It was because I was determined. And,
You didn't know any better.
right. And it's almost like I had no fear. If I'd had fear, I would have never done it. But, it was one of the best experiences I've ever had. It's the same thing with this shop. When everything falls together in your lap and you turn your back on it, well, then you're turning your back on the universe's idea of what you should do, and it both times have been a success. So,
well, I talked to my kids. I have 3 teenage daughters. One's going away to college, and
God bless you.
And our next guest, yeah, thank you. Our next guest on the podcast is actually my coach, like life coach, and we talk about all the time that everything's been all right up till this moment. Like everything for you, every while. Like I owned a restaurant in New Orleans. I left it and moved to the Gulf Coast to work for Papa John's, which didn't make a lot of sense at the time. And then after the week before the Katrina hit, I got offered a job up here. And then I moved to Oxford. Then I came back here with like 1 hour's thought process on moving back here. And then like when that business deal fell apart, my wife, I had a list of 10 things of jobs I could do. And my wife's like, "What about real estate?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'll do real estate."
Well, look at you now. Yeah. Damn, you're everywhere. I mean, you're the man. And that's like, seriously.
Well, and also, I had some time. I owned part of the Packet newspaper. A lot of people don't even know it or
I didn't
remember
know that either.
But so I was there for 3 years seeing the worst Columbus had to offer. And we made a conscious decision when I left there. I'm not going to go back to New Orleans. I had job offers in restaurants. I could do real estate down there. Everybody still knows me. It'd be fine. And when we decided to live here, we're like, there's enough people talking negative about it. I'll talk positive. And as I said, in the aggregate, I'll get one small percentage point of that when the entire the city limits, not the county, goes up 10% in 1 year. Well, I own some rental property. I fix up one house on North Side. I got to stick to my people on North Side every year.
I saw that house.
Yeah, but every time we fix it, I got 3 in a row, and that's what people you start like, it's going to look like Charleston. I'm like, well, if the guy I sold the house to will cut his grass, it will look like Charleston. And my kids, every time I drive by the house, I shake my fist. I'm like, cut your grass every week. But talking about building new buildings or apartment complexes or what you're doing, every house that looks a little nicer. We had somebody come fix up a rental down the block from us. I live across the street from Peter Imes from the Dispatch. Well, Peter did a whole bunch of landscaping. Then they stepped up theirs. Well, now I have to do better. I get my yard cut every week, and then Billy came in. Billy Cox came in, and he fixed up a house that had been air quote fixed up 4 years before he bought it, and then he restored it, and planted more azaleas and did that. And I'm like, oh, now I got to take better care of my rental house, And so that does work a lot. I do like that. Like our new mayor owns some rental properties. He takes real good care of them, and he's starting to work on that. And you mentioned Rusty Green. We're going over to look at Lee Park about same thing. People sometimes have to step up and fix stuff. Like,
I totally think it's like some people came in from the city or that lived here. I meant some just residents, and they were like, well, they were asking about, well, what is it that motivates you? And I said, the excitement of what can be. And I said, if we're stagnant and you're just always going to be the home of Tennessee Williams and nothing more, well, then you failed. We need a new Tennessee Williams. We need, you know what I'm saying? We need to have many important things here, many important people, many important aspects of the city that help us thrive. And that story is yet to be written. So
yeah, and it's there's so many non-native transplants like us who have come in the last 10 years and just stared at people and been like, no, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And part of it, I understand, is my perspective. Both previous 2 mayors have said the same thing. They're like, you do come from New Orleans where there's craters in the ground and you could get shot tonight if you wanted. And I said, I've lived downtown for 13 years and there's only been one like true home invasion in Everything's Sunny in the South, like a home invasion, like break-in in the last 10 years. Yeah. South Montgomery and Starkville, it happens a lot.
Oh my God.
And and they say when people of disparate levels of income live in close proximity to one another, that's where crime starts, we have a almost self-segregated town from the good old days where the bad part of town is in one part, but the bad part's gotten smaller. I talked to Councilman Roderick Smith. I was talking about East Columbus is the hottest market percentage-wise over the last 5 years in our 7 county region.
Well,
That
it's housing is a short commodity here. I
no
mean, it's
rentals are
like,
great. Yeah,
and it's one of those things where I think I see that as being the potential for coming forward because you've got not only the school, but you've also got that military base and everybody and all the people that travel at the hospital,
it's
the
now. Yeah,
medical
it's a
people.
huge regional hospital. They just bought
I know.
Octaba's hospital out.
And
Like just
I had the new cardiac surgeon didn't have a place to go, so he rented my house out downstairs just for a couple months. And I mean, it's one of those things where I think we can do that. I mean, it's a huge potential. We can do better.
yeah. Well, I'm glad you're here and investing in that sort of stuff. As we move towards the end, why don't you start talking about literally plugging away the Ridge House? And are you doing catering in town still, or
Well, that wasn't the plan, but it kind of happened when I got involved with the historic homes. It was, different people started asking me to, after I did a cocktail party for myself at Ridge House, people started asking me, and I've done some amazing parties and in some gorgeous homes. I mean, just these places are amazing. And I've had a great time with it. Ridge House has been kind of the stimulus for my whole life here in Columbus, and it is my home, and I love it. And I do Airbnb there. I do, like I said, I've had medical people rent and stay there, and special events. I've had cocktail parties. People rent it for luncheons, dinners, things like that. So yes, it's available for all that. And as far as if you need help on a party, I'm here. I'm still from the days when I worked at the shop in Fairhope. People were paying me to hang artwork and to do all that, and place furniture. I mean, you find out you have talents that you never thought you had, and it's one of those things where I've had a fun time with it. I never thought I'd be doing it, but I do it well and I have fun with it. And the shop is kind of the culmination of all that because you come in and we've got a great facility downtown, great people that work there that help. Kathy,
yes,
Kathy Howe and Gina Hildebrandt. We've got William Calloway. We've got me and Billy. And I mean, we've got so many people who are very helpful and who have helped us to be a success. And we've got great items in the shop. Furniture, we sell everything from an antique, high-end antique to, gently used, mid-century modern, and there's a few brand new things. We've got decorators coming in, bringing their overstocked and brand new inventory because they didn't need it because they bought something else for a client that they didn't, because they didn't like that thing. So I mean, we don't say no to anything.
yeah.
I've got porcelain sink sitting in there, brand new sink sitting in there with faucets and historically correct porcelain faucets. Um, Everybody should come in and check it out because we probably have something you might need or want, and something you just can't live without. And it's a fun place. And we're getting ready, actually, and I'll throw this in there. A friend of mine who is in Mobile, we went to school together. She and her husband, we've grown up together. She is coming in this Friday and Saturday, and she is a vintage jewelry specialist. And when I was in Mobile catering a wedding about 6 months ago, my friend was like, "Go with me to this party, and it's for Cindy Ratley." And I was like, "What is it?" And she was telling me about her being into jewelry because she's a corporate accountant. And I was like, "Okay, I'll go. That's crazy." So we go. Hell, I ended up spending money on my daughter. I bought like 2 pieces of jewelry, and I was the only guy there. And I thought, Lord, how did this happen? But she and I are good friends, and I realize it's hot right now. And so she's coming up here to Columbus this week, and she's going to be at the shop, and she's going to be selling stuff. So if anybody's interested in some beautiful vintage jewelry, come out there. And husbands, if you need Christmas gifts or birthday gifts or something, I'm telling you, she is a specialist in this, and I had no idea she was into it, but she's amazing. So it's something that,
Yeah, we'll put something out there about that.
yeah, please do.
That is another fascinating thing to me, other than the money in town that I had no idea about. I tell people a lot of times, like, the guy that patented the trolling motor lives here. The first person that did these roll-up foam mattresses that were popular about 5 years ago.
Who's that guy who did the energy drink that it started here? It was one
Yeah,
of
the
them.
Quencher or whatever.
Quencher, yeah.
Yeah, and just between here and Starkville and some of the old money families, like it's interesting how many. It's a river town. How many people come through here, and we're starting to see more and more of the people from the factories, the higher end people. We don't have trouble selling a solid old house downtown. Not a problem
Well, and the
selling at all.
prices are amazing.
Yeah. No, that's what my friend, is an attorney in New Orleans, came up for a crawfish boil at my house once. He just stood in the front yard and he's like,
Yeah.
"You're in $1 million house in a bad neighborhood off
Right.
Britannia, like not on St. Charles."
Well, that's why I'm here, because after buying the house, restoring the house, it's still a better deal, tons over, than anywhere I could find.
Yeah, and like I said, we're a little over 4 hours from New Orleans, or 4 hours from the
Oh,
coast, like
Quality
centrally
of life is
located.
great. I mean, it really is. And one last thing is about me is that another interesting connector is that I'm from Mobile, which you're on the Tom Bigby in Columbus. It winds and it ends down in Mobile. And every time I hear these stories about it, I think, God, I wonder if my ancestors in Mobile, how much they had to do, because one of my ancestors was a Norwegian sea captain, and he was in the port of Mobile. And I hear these stories about, like, Holly Ivy showed me furniture that had been in her family, been in the house since it was built, and it came on the riverboat from Mobile. And I just, like, that's so cool to have that connection of the two cities I live in and that I love, and they are so connected all the way back to the early 1800s. So I think it's kind of cool.
And of course, everyone here either goes to Smith Lake or they go Fairhope and Orange Beach.
Uh-huh.
And as far as the future of Columbus, it's just like where Fairhope is. There's somewhere on the radar between Nashville and Austin, then Chattanooga, and then Fairhope, and then Ocean Springs.
Mhm.
There's a spot on there where you don't have to be. There's no reason we shouldn't be more competitive with Natchez. That's where I use example of when people are like, I'm like, you need to quit saying Starkville this or this, that. Like I say, Natchez, Mississippi, and look there and go, they've only got, like, if you don't have the tourism thing going on, and I honestly wish we had more tourism. I think we probably overplay our hand a little on it, but I do think that there's a spot for it. I think that we're starting to see a better organization. I'm seeing more buses for pilgrimage than ever, and so there's definitely people who want to come. You just got to get their attention.
Well, I think we piggyback on, we don't just need to survive on pilgrimage. I think pilgrimage will grow, also be spawned off of things like football games, with Starkville and with the W here and with the University of Alabama. We are kind of right in that meaty middle where it's like we could benefit from it in so much. And then you've got the industry. And if we get that, people come here and see it. Well, then when you advertise for, the pilgrimage, people have it in their mind already.
Yeah.
And I think people think, oh, we're not on an interstate, so you're not viable. That's not true, because the highway system, now that is one thing. Mississippi has an incredible highway system here. And I don't know the full story on when and how that happened, but the traveling is definitely not difficult.
We may have too many roads. Yeah, that generally happens when you have a population that elects the same people over and over and over again. You get cool stuff like an air base that didn't get shut down by BRAC. You get Mississippi State's the National Center for Unmanned Aeronautics. Like there's it's the NASA for drones. Like you get those things. That's the upside of electing the same people over and over and over again. So yeah, and we, of course, our highways locally here, people don't realize how much they've been redone. They're not bigger, but they're handling the heaviest loads that any interstate can handle, which you normally don't get for these ground level smaller roads. So
I agree.
I'm impressed with that. Well, how do they reach you if they want to go to the Ridge House, and how do they find you if they want to go to the Southern Exchange?
Well, if you are interested in Ridge House, we are at 571 Ridge Road, and I am online at www.ridgehouse1835.com. The shop is Southern Exchange. We are at 418 Main Street, and you can find us on Facebook, Instagram. We're pretty much all over. If you are interested, I'm happy to help you. If you My cell is 251-895-1160. I have no problem with taking your call if you have a question about Ridge House, about the exchange, or if you just want to talk about a party, or if you need, Billy's got Wisteria Place. It's a historic home. If you want to see it, I mean, he gives tours. So, I mean, hey, we're here, and we're happy to chat with you and help you in any way we can.
Well, I'm glad I got you on here today. Thanks for your investment in Columbus. I've started saying my hometown. I hope I don't get any pushback from my friends in New Orleans on that. So,
well, that's my other home, so I'm really loving it here myself.
all right. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.